my colleagues to please remain on mute until you have raised your hand icon if you have questions or comments after each committee presentation. And we now like to turn to today's agenda and begin with the Committee of the Whole. Would like to call the Committee of the Whole to order. And it is now time for the committee to consider today's consent agenda, which consists of the approval of the minutes. If there are no objections, or I should say, are there any objections to the approval of the consent agenda? Seeing no objections, the consent agenda is approved. We have one information item on today's discussion agenda. Over the past 2 months, the CSU has nimbly adapted to the extraordinary and fast-changing demands of the unprecedented public health emergency we are facing. At the Chancellor's office and across the CSU's 23 campuses, leadership, faculty, staff, and students have been tirelessly working together to implement creative and innovative ways to protect the health and well-being of our vast CSU family, while continuing to advance our academic mission during these very trying times. It continues to be an inspired, but frankly not unexpected response. Chancellor White will now present a report to update this board on the implications for the CSU due to COVID-19. Chancellor, please begin.
Well, thank you, Chair Day, and good morning, everyone. On January 28th, when I delivered my annual State of the California State University address, I described a story of a university on a steady ascent, helping to drive California's future prosperity as it elevates individuals, families, and communities across the state, throughout the nation, and around the world, through the transformative power of a prestigious degree earned from a campus of the California State University. Then and now, just 105 days later, that story continues. And there is much evidence to support the notion that the state of the CSU remains strong. Indeed, this is fortunate because today and over the next few years, make no bones about it, we are and will continue to be challenged by the extraordinarily difficult circumstances imposed by the historic pandemic of COVID-19. Let me start by reaching out to those individuals who themselves or whose loved ones have been affected directly by this disease. I offer my personal support, understanding, and well wishes, along with those of the entire CSU community. And for those who have lost a loved one or friend, we offer our heartfelt condolences. This morning, I'd like to cover 3 main points. The first will briefly review where we have been as a university and the challenges now in front of us due to the COVID-19 pandemic and its health and financial implications. Secondly, I will speak to the rationale for our planning efforts for the fall 2020 term and beyond. And thirdly, I'll close with some thoughts about the future for our students, faculty, and staff. Turning to the first point, it is not an understatement that the COVID-19 era presents remarkable challenges to our health and welfare, to our economy, and to the way we sustain a vibrant university that embraces inclusive excellence while executing our core mission of teaching and learning, of discovery and innovative contribution, and of engagement with and service to the communities, state, and nation we call home. I stated in January that this university, and I quote, will continue to advance bold, creative, and principled solutions to public higher education's most pressing and complex challenges, end quote. Well, it goes without saying, in the intervening 105 days, they've become infinitely more pressing and complex. I stated then, and I underscore today, that moving forward, the CSU will continue to be committed to courageously doing the right thing. We will stay the course, but we won't stay the same. Over the past few months, as we have tracked, analyzed, and discussed the progression of COVID-19, I have witnessed a remarkable growth in the sense of community and resolve among the faculty, staff, and students, and among the presidents and the vice chancellors, really a stirring and gratifying expression of compassion, of care and commitment to our students, faculty, and staff. Our resilience is being tested, but I see evidence every day that we are more than up to the challenges now and in the journey ahead. And I see evidence that we are courageously doing the right thing for the moment and for the short and long-term future of our beloved university. Indeed, courage to do the right thing, even when it is unpopular. And finally, on January 28th, I stated, quote, "Of course, the list of challenges and opportunities is much longer and will change over time," end quote. Well, I assure you, this is not what I had in mind. In spring 2020, in response to the rapidly emerging pandemic, the CSU quickly transitioned courses and student support services to virtual modalities to ensure the health and safety of students, faculty, and staff, and to enable completion of the academic term. We are grateful to those students, faculty, and staff for their alacrity, their skill, their commitment, and their perseverance during this massive pivot. In addition to the COVID-19 related alterations in the university, we are also facing significant budgetary constraints over the next several years that will be discussed in greater detail later today in the Committee on Finance. These alterations include a decrease in revenues, inclusive of that generated by auxiliary support enterprises, as well as increased costs associated with the mitigation of COVID-19, such as those related to sanitation, to personal protective equipment, facility modifications, and enhanced technology to facilitate virtual learning and business operations of the university. It is this confluence, the coming together of the demands of the pandemic and the austere budget realities we face, that makes our planning efforts for the next academic year both complex and yet vitally essential. But let me be very clear. The California State University remains open. We never closed. And we are steadfast in our commitment to inclusive excellence and stand ready to meet California's higher education needs in the 2020-21 academic year. The CSU encourages all admitted and continuing students to enroll and is committed to providing the best and richest possible educational experience for our students, enabling progress to degree completion and to licensure in those fields for which it is required. Moreover, the health, safety, and welfare of students, employees, guests, and our local communities are first order requirements for the CSU always, and especially in the COVID-19 era. Now, let me turn to my second of 3 points, and that is the necessary and responsible approach to planning for the next academic year. While the planning horizon is for the entire 2021 academic year, currently we have enough clarity to focus only on fall of 2020. The planning framework for course delivery has been and will continue to necessarily be virtual. This virtual planning approach for the next academic year is necessary because of the evolving data surrounding the progression of COVID-19, current and as forecast throughout the 2021 academic year. As the initial wave of infections, morbidity, and mortality is beginning to plateau or subside in some, but not all, regions of California, the nonpartisan academic researchers and medical and public health experts forecast a second smaller wave later in summer, followed by a very significant wave coupled with influenza forecast for late fall, and another wave in the first quarter of 2021. Experts also point out that immunity in the population is now approaching the 2 to 3% range and needs to be in the 60 to 80% range to begin to achieve the so-called herd immunity. That won't happen during the next 18 months. And there is no vaccine yet. And while hope springs eternal, it is unlikely that one will become widely available throughout the coming academic year. We cannot change the biology of this disease. As a society, all we can do is mitigate it through our personal and collective preventive measures. And in this regard, the university must do its part. Indeed, on May 8th, Governor Newsom emphasized that COVID-19 will be present in our communities until there is a vaccine or therapeutic, and it will be up to all of us to change our behaviors to eliminate opportunities for the disease to spread. Let me emphasize that this virtual planning approach is necessary because a course that might begin in a face-to-face modality in the fall would likely have to be switched to a virtual format during the term if the serious second wave of the pandemic occurs as forecast in late fall. And this approach to virtual planning is necessary because it might not be possible for some students, faculty, and staff to safely travel to campus. Thus, we should have the option of remote learning available throughout the curriculum to every extent possible. Said another way, this virtual planning approach preserves as many options for as many students as possible and is consistent with our guiding principle of meeting students where they are. Consequently, our planning approach will result in CSU courses primarily being delivered virtually for the fall 2020 term, with limited exceptions for in-person activities that cannot be delivered virtually, are indispensable to the university's core mission, and can be conducted within the rigorous standards of safety and welfare. There will be hybrid approaches, and there will be variability across the 23 campuses due to specific context and circumstances. Some examples of potential exceptions, and only when there are sufficient resources available to assure that rigorous health and safety requirements are in place, include clinical classes with training mannequins for our nursing students, such that we can keep students on track for licensure and entry into the state's healthcare workforce. Essential physical and life science laboratory classes, enabling degree completion and entry into the energy and bioscience fields. Access to kilns and other unique facilities to enable students in the performing and creative arts to explore and express the depth, breadth, and beauty of humanity. Hands-on experiences with unique instrumentation and senior capstone projects for engineering, architecture, and agriculture students. And access to the Blue Water hands-on interactive simulator for boat and ship handling to provide students with the knowledge, understanding, and skills necessary for the maritime industry and required for licensure by the U.S. Coast Guard and the UN International Maritime Organization. But anything done on a campus this fall won't be as it was in the past. It will be different. Meeting rigorous standards of safety and welfare. This is a new and expensive reality for us. For those limited courses where in-person instruction is indispensable and can be justified, the enrollment per section will be less. For instruction and research laboratories, the distance between participants will be greater. The need for personal protective equipment appropriate to the circumstances will be prevalent. And the need to sanitize and disinfect spaces and equipment between users will be essential. Indeed, the health and safety and welfare of students, employees, guests, and the local community are first-order requirements for the California State University. The granting of limited exceptions to permit in-person activities will continue to be informed by thoughtful consultation with academic senates, associated students, staff councils, and union leadership, and will be based on compelling educational and research needs while continuing to meet safety benchmarks. Any exceptions may be permitted only in the continued presence of the aforementioned rigorous safety measures and training. Also, only in consideration of resource availability and other matters of local context, and be in accordance with the guidance of local and state public health agencies, the repopulation directives of governmental authorities, along with other relevant regulatory agencies. This combination, really a myriad of factors, will result in variability across the 23 campuses due to specific context and circumstances. But predominantly, there will be limited in-person experiential learning occurring on campuses for the fall 2020 term. There will be hybrid models, and on some campuses and in some academic disciplines, course offerings are likely to be exclusively virtual. The availability of on-campus student housing will of necessity be reduced. We acknowledge, the CSU acknowledges that our decisions positively affect the communities with which our campuses are interconnected by minimizing the spread of COVID-19, and yet also negatively affect local economies by impacting commerce and reducing the availability of cultural and athletic events. Students and families, along with faculty and staff, will receive preliminary information this month from their respective CSU campuses regarding the nature of their instructional modality and the types of accommodations that will be available to ensure a rich and meaningful learning experience. Let me close now with some thoughts about the future. I hope that our approach to planning for next academic year turns out not to be as necessary as it now appears. In other words, I hope we are wrong. But look, our university, when open without restrictions and fully in person, as is the traditional norm of the past, is a place where over 500,000 people come together in close and vibrant proximity with each other on a daily basis. That approach, sadly, just isn't in the cards now, as I have described. There are some people today who will say that we're moving too far, too fast in our planning. I acknowledge and I respect that point of view. But we sit with a different reality, and that is that we're finishing up over the next few weeks our current academic year with finals and in some cases virtual, or sadly in others no commencement celebrations. Most academic year faculty are just a few weeks away from being off contract until the next academic year in August when they return. And our excellent and dedicated faculty are, of course, vital to ensure the vibrancy and efficacy of our learning and discovery environment with every modality of course delivery, face-to-face, virtual, hybrid. While there will be more clarity of disease status in August across the varying regions of California where our campuses are located, it would be irresponsible to wait until summer to plan for predominantly virtual learning across the curriculum. Said another way, it is wise to plan now and over the next several months with enriched training and improvements in virtual learning environments, only to pull back a bit in the fall to more in-person as circumstances might allow. But it would be irresponsible to approach it the other way around and wait until August to only then scramble and not be prepared to provide a robust learning environment for our students. And to our students, new and ongoing, undergraduate and graduate, this is not the time to pause or decline an opportunity to attend the CSU campus. And remember that robust financial aid remains available. This is the moment to persist, to take that very important first or next step to a degree that promises a lifetime of upward economic and social mobility for students, their families, and communities. Indeed, with the benefit of ongoing planning and deep consultation with our university stakeholders, coupled with additional training and professional development during the summer, the CSU faculty, staff, and administrators will be well prepared to deliver an even more comprehensive and robust virtual education experience for students in fall 2020, including extensive academic and student support. We expect bold, emerging innovations that will leverage the power of the system within and across campuses, such that working together in a new, imaginative, and creative ways, we will further enrich the experiences of our new and returning students in the coming academic year. As President Mahoney wrote so eloquently last week in the San Francisco Chronicle regarding the fall term, and I quote, "Some or all of this may have to be done remotely, depending upon what protecting public health requires. But we and many other universities are working hard to perfect remote instruction and build virtual communities. No, it won't be the same, but it will be good. And most importantly, It will enable students to maintain their academic progress, to maintain momentum towards a degree that will be transformative personally and economically. This is not the time to pause in education. Thank you, Lynn, for those thoughts. Chair Day, my colleagues and I are here to answer any questions you and your fellow trustees have and to hear your thoughts about our beloved university.
Well, thank you, Chancellor. Thank you for that comprehensive and honest and in some respects sobering assessment of the challenges that we are faced with at this great institution. And I too would like to highlight and emphasize your closing comments about accentuating the positive for both our current students and our prospective students, and the tremendous opportunities that we can realize out of this controversy and crisis. Again, at this time, trustees, please keep your microphones on mute until you've been called upon. And if you would like to ask a question or have a comment, which I suspect we might have a few, please use the raise your hand icon in your Zoom software program, and I will call on you in the order in which I see them. And I see Trustee Kames is first.
Good morning. First of all, I just wanted to thank the Chancellor and the Presidents for their leadership, and I wanted to thank our faculty and staff for being incredibly creative in delivering everything virtually. So this past weekend, CSSA held their monthly plenary, and a lot of students were putting emphasis on having some sort of a basic needs crisis because with everything that's going on, from students losing their housing to not being able to work because of everything that is going on. I just wanted everyone to be mindful of that. And again, I appreciate the Chancellor's leadership and the President's, and I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Trustee. Very helpful. Other comments or questions from the board? Trustee Simon, I see your hand. I don't see the icon, but go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a question for the Chancellor, and it's okay if we don't know this yet. With the virtual planning, clearly there are, the facilities continue, they need to continue to be updated and janitorial. I'm curious about.
Wait, hold here.
Sorry about that. I'm curious about availability of technology for students and how we're thinking about and addressing digital disparities, if that is an issue, and any of your thoughts on that.
Well, yes, the digital divide in California remains and is a profound concern to our planning and to our campus leaders. And there's two ways to think about in this context. One is the availability of bandwidth where a student might be living and or the living circumstances where they may be with family members in a living arrangement that is crowded and is not a private place or a quiet place to study. But there's also the digital issues of respect to having the appropriate hardware, software, firmware, a MiFi, and things of that nature. Now, one of the nice is the wrong word. One of the helpful programs that we've started is one called CSU Cares, and it was launched a couple of weeks ago, and it is funded by a vast majority of the new money comes out of the federal stimulation program. But students who are of need were able to receive stipends to help them with the COVID-19 induced costs, which for some were buying an iPad or a laptop or getting better bandwidth at home. For others, the campuses were able to provide loaners of several hundred laptops and again, Wi-Fi and MiFi, things of that nature. Several campuses also turned their parking lots into hotspots and allowed students to come back and park socially distanced on their parking lots in order to access the bandwidth. But this is a very significant issue and one that we're mindful of and one that we continue to invest in. And so for us to be successful in the fall will be to have further broadband available across the state. And I know in the conversations on the Governor's Council post-secondary education that I and the other leaders sit on, along with several other people in the governor's administration, that the idea of much more broadband access across the state, urban, rural, frontier, suburban, doesn't matter where, that if we can get that licked, it's going to help not only the California State University, but it'll also help the K through 12 educational enterprise as well. And it is a priority that is at the top of one of the tops of the lists for the governor and for the state to tackle as quickly as is humanly possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Trustee Simon. I see next Trustee Sebelius and then Trustee Adamson.
Good morning, Chancellor. I think almost everybody's in agreement that our mantra has to be safety first. But amidst the anticipated budget cuts, in anticipation of the anticipated budget cuts, I would urge you, the trustees, your staff in the Chancellor's office and the campus leadership to keep the core mission of the CSU in mind, which is its academic mission, its teaching of students. So please, when the budget, the reduced budgets will be allocated, this should be our priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Sebelius. I see Trustee Krinsk, I think you may be raising your hand on the video. I'm going to go to Trustee Adamson first, since I see the icon. And then if you need to speak, just click on the icon button. Trustee Adamson first.
Well, first, I want to acknowledge just the incredible Herculean effort of our faculty over the last 2 months and completely shifting their mode of delivery of education. I think what they've done is incredible. How quickly they were able to do that and adapt needs to be acknowledged publicly, and we thank them for those efforts. Chancellor White, I did have a question. Do you have any insight with regard to discussions going on currently with the NCAA and how and what will happen with student athletes within our system over this next 6 or 8 months? I know it's probably a question I can answer by saying we don't know yet, but any insight into those discussions as we start to listen to some of the professional sides of sports right now discussing their options?
Well, thank you, Trustee Adamson, for answering your own question. So, I mean, it's complex. So these issues of health and safety infuse not only for the academic mission of the university, but for any other activity at the university, be it intercollegiate athletics or intramural sports or group performances of theater and orchestras and vocal ensembles, etc. The overlay for intercollegiate athletics, and we are at various levels of intercollegiate athletics across the 23 campuses, from prominent national programs down to Division II, and even some that aren't even in the NC2A that are much more modest in their scope. But for the programs that are Division I and the conferences that they are in, the Mountain West, the Big West, et cetera, the NC2A writ large is in that early conversation about how do we safely go about bringing student athletes back into their sports. And just a few days ago, Mark Emmert, who is the president of the NC2A, made the case, which I agree with, that it's not going to be possible to bring student athletes and coaching staffs back to a campus before we actually bring back faculty and students in the academic enterprise. There are also big contractual issues with television, with game guarantees for other opponents, particularly in football and in basketball. Basketball is a ways away, that need to be thought through. And the various conferences are trying to decide how the conference is going to behave. And of course, when you play on the national scale, which many of our campuses do, what they're going to do in Florida or Georgia or Texas, may be on a totally different timeline than what we're going to be doing in California. And what we do in California may differ in the Los Angeles basin, which is the current hotspot in the state, versus other parts of the state. So it is one of the most complex, like everything else right now, other than we're on it. And our presidents have been meeting and talking to the campuses, like Gail Hutchinson campus and others, that many of the CSUs are in the CCAA conference. And they have decided last week as presidents that there will not be a fall sports season. And it's a sad outcome, but it is the right thing to do for planning at this point. So a work in progress, a lot of moving parts. We are seeking both academically, athletically, culturally, to re-engage as soon as it can be done within the resources we have and without abrogating in any way, shape, or form the health and safety, not only of our employees, but our student and student athletes, as well as fans who might come to a practice or to a game.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Trustee Adamson, for that question. Trustee Krentz, did you have your hand up?
I did, and I thank you for recognizing me. Mr. Chancellor, from what I've heard, I think we're all in agreement, and I think you agree, that virtual learning is generally considered to be fairly, if not significantly inferior to the alternative of actually being in a location with other students. Is it just the financial situation that has caused it to be impossible to go forward with that, which would be very much unlike some of larger competitor schools that you have that have decided to proceed on a testing and tracing path? Was that impossible from a financial perspective to consider, or simply the 32 universities made it to the 23 campuses made it impossible for you to be able to project that over such a large body of different locations, and therefore testing and certainly tracing would be more difficult?
Well, it is the confluence of the issues around the COVID-19 that the health and safety, the separation, et cetera, that I talked about, plus the impending financial resource constraints that we're going to face, that we're facing now and will face going forward over the next several years. I take a bit of umbrage to the notion that virtual learning has to be inferior to in-person learning. I will say there are differences. The differences, obviously, if it is a hands-on class for aeronautical engineering and their capstone project as a senior is to work together as a team to assemble a rocket and launch it up to 11,000 feet, that is difficult to do virtually, and I agree with that. And so that's a lost moment if we can't do that. Or maybe better said, a postponed moment. But we are committed to improving the technology which is emerging every day, to do the training of our very talented faculty who may know their discipline very, very well, who do know their disciplines very, very well, but don't know the technology and how to use it to create that virtual experience that is as engaging, as informative, as interactive as it is in person. To be honest, our students are much more comfortable using technology in interacting with others than perhaps some of us who grew up before these puppies were invented. So it is the combination of the proper hardware and software, which is emerging in the educational space exponentially right now because people see business opportunities here. Coupled with taking the time this summer to take our faculty, and I'm going to ask Mary Papazian in just 1 second to chime in on this, but to take the time between now and the fall with our faculty who are interested, to put them in intensive circumstances to really work and learn on the technology side. We have to, Trustee Krinsk, we have to work to create a robust, enriched, engaged learning environment in the virtual space. Our students deserve it. And it's not only the instructional aspects of it, but it's also going to be the robust and rich and effective academic support and student support. In other words, translating the physical experience that we have worked so hard at in graduation edition 2025 on campuses and express that to the extent we need to in the virtual space until we can get back into the non-virtual space. President Papazian, if you would comment a little bit about, I forget the name of it, but what you're doing a training this summer that I thought was, told me that it is subscribed in several hundred people in one day or something of that nature.
Yes, thank you, Chancellor White. We understand very much that the experience of students in the classroom begins in part with the faculty who are delivering those courses. And so many of our faculty have been interested in learning more about how to do so with excellence. So we've developed a summer institute. We're able to use the dollars from the CARES grant from the federal government for institutional support. And it's a 3-week program. There'll be several different iterations of it. We put out the call to faculty, and it allows them to look and learn from different platforms that are out there, different technologies, different approaches, how to flip those classrooms, how to support students in them, how to engage students. We already have over 600 faculty who have signed up to participate in this summer program, and it's entirely voluntary. Support to the faculty for the time they're spending during the summer. But the key is that it's really focused on student learning and student engagement and supporting faculty comfort and exploration with different models. So I'm really optimistic on how this will develop.
Thank you. I just to continue my thought, if I can, it seems to me that you may be able to simulate the learning experience in some ways, but at the same time, and with the understanding that a good liberal education is what you have left after you've forgotten everything that you were taught. Being together in a normal environment is generally considered to be part of the learning experience, and that will be difficult to replicate. But is the idea of simply testing and tracing economically prohibitive, or has it just simply did not seem feasible on any level, so was summarily dismissed, which may well be the case?
A system with about half of our number of students looked at the cost of, on a weekly basis, of testing. And it was $25 million a week to test. So at the current moment, let alone if the tests are available. So let alone, so at the moment, financially, testing everybody is not in the cards. So there's going to undoubtedly be protocols that develop through the sentinel testing. There are ways to determine if there are hotspots emerging on a campus or in a facility through group analysis of temperatures and effluent from buildings, to be honest with you. All of that is emerging. But until we have ways in which we can adequately test and trace, and enough people to trace, the governor recently said there was 2,000, I'm going to get the number wrong, 2,841 tracers in the entire state of California for a population of 40 million people. And so the governor's office, in cooperation with UC San Francisco and UCLA's medical school, are now doing a sort of a 20-hour program to create a credential to increase the number of tracers in California to 20,000. But when we open our campuses, we're going to have tracers on campus, because we're not going to, if we have an outbreak on campus, we're going to have to be able to trace it right away. We don't have to get in line and wait 2 or 3 days while this thing grows exponentially. So these are all of the things that our operational folks are thinking about. But at the end of the day, Trustee Krensk, it's enormously expensive. And we are going to be in a resource constrained environment. And so we have to find that sweet spot.
Thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, President Papazian, for answering Trustee Krensk's questions.
Let me just say thank you very much. I appreciate the comprehensive time you've put into, of course, this seminal situation, and the courtesy you've extended to the board here as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Trustee Krensk. Next up, Governor Kounalakis.
Thank you very much, Chair Day. And let me just start by thanking you, Mr. Chair, and of course, Chancellor White, for really being a steady hand at the wheel during an unprecedented and incredibly challenging and chaotic time, as well, of course, as all the staff of the CSU, all the presidents. This is something that really no one could have prepared for. We're certainly at the federal level, globally, maybe we could have prepared better. But as much as one could conceive of preparing for a global pandemic, it's pretty tough stuff. So I just want to commend you for the incredible transmission from or transfer of in-person courses to online courses. It's my understanding from previous conversations that we had about 8,000 courses online prior to the pandemic. And in a period of about 3 weeks, the CSU transitioned 72,000 more courses online. It's unprecedented and extraordinary, and will allow our students to finish their course load this quarter. I have 2 quick questions for you. One is, in this fall transfer to online, I understand it's going to be primarily into distance learning. Will there be the opportunity for any in-person type learning for graduate students, for those who are doing courses that require labs and nursing training, which often requires more than just a video? Will there be any courses that might be able to be conducted in person? And secondly, my second question is, I certainly cannot imagine that we would have a full analysis of the financial implications of COVID-19 or of this change from our traditional model to distance learning. But do we even have a back of the envelope at this point to know, for instance, I cannot imagine in an environment like this, we would even contemplate increasing tuition. I certainly imagine that fees, student fees, if you're not on campus, are going to be difficult to imagine students conceptually thinking that they should pay. But do we have even a back of the envelope understanding of our revenues, the impact to our revenues and the impact to our expenses? And Tim, can you tell us, I mean, do we think we can do this without increasing costs so that we can ensure that at a time where we're asking students to invest in their CSU education online instead of in person, that we can ensure that it's not going to be more expensive for them. And again, I understand that there's more that we're going to know relative to this equation when we know about the budget, but I think we can also assume that there's going to be a hit there as well. So I know the answer is no, we don't have financials on this, but is there anything you can say relative to this bigger equation about what fall is going to look like on our ability to make the 23 campuses and their operations able to pencil and stay in the black?
Well, so your first thing about the fall in terms of context, absolutely there will be on-campus activities during the summer and fall, but they have to be conducted within those very rigorous standards of health, safety, and welfare that we've been talking about. So research labs, for example, that are graduate students and faculty or undergraduate students and faculty are engaged in extramurally funded research, those need to continue to go forward, but again, with sufficient spacing, maybe doing shifts, wearing personal protective gear, et cetera, et cetera. From a curricular point of view, you're right. I mean, the state of California needs nurses into the workforce. So again, when there's sufficient rigorous health and safety requirements in place, we want to bring our nurses into the clinical classes with training mannequins for the nursing students so they can make progress in their clinical practice and get licensure and enter into the healthcare workforce. But those mannequins, they're going to have to spread out more than they normally would. Instead of 15 students per lab, it's going to be 5. And in between everybody's use, the mannequin is going to have to be sanitized. And everybody's going to have to wear.
That's for fall. That's envisioned for fall.
Yes, and so the planning is in case all hell breaks loose and we can't come at all on fall in any meaningful way. But the idea is when we get closer to fall, if there are campuses in certain regions of the state where it's going to be health and safety and the disease pandemic is reduced, then there will be more potential. That's our goal, is to plan for the most rigorous, difficult moment and hope for the best moment and find ourselves somewhere in between. Now, on the finances, we have more than a back of the envelope. It's a small envelope because the numbers aren't very good. And Steve in our Committee on Finance, Steve and Ryan are going to go through it in some detail. If you'd like him to say something now, we can, but it is like everything else we're doing right now, it's complex. And I'd like the context of the finances to be understood in addition to the horrifying numbers. And finally, we don't know because the governor's May revise doesn't come out until the 14th. And so until they do their good work, and Keely and the Department of Finance are working day and night to try and make this work for the entirety of the state of California, which is a very, very difficult task right now. But once we know where we stand, then we'll be able to predict more accurately exactly what kind of resources we have and what we can afford to do. We have cut a lot of costs by stopping traveling and by essentially a hiring freeze. So we call it a chill because there are a few exceptions. But by the end of this week and next week, we'll have even a better picture. But this afternoon, when we do the Committee on Finance, we'll be going through the numbers as we know them today.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Governor, for the questions. Anything further? If not, move to Trustee Morales next.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank the staff, the faculty, all the presidents, and you, Chancellor, and your staff for all the work that you've done and pivoted to what I think is well, under the circumstances, a good place. So thank you, and I also thank you for the boldness in your doing the right thing, in your leadership of doing virtual. So thank you. I have some questions about how other sectors are are doing, what other sectors are doing, if we know, like University of California, the community colleges, and then the K through 12 field, for obvious reasons. I mean, we obviously, are impacted by all these, including K through 12. We want, I think, if we all agree on this, we're all concerned with the preparedness of our students as they hopefully will join the CSU family. So that's one. The other is, I think that broadband is obviously a big issue, and I'm glad that who opened the discussion today after you spoke was a student representative. I think that's very very good. But I think that in terms of broadband, that's something that obviously it's a huge challenge. And I just wonder whether this may be an opportunity for the CSU to join the community colleges and the K through 12 field and join the grassroots organizations that have been working for universal broadband to actually move the agenda forward. I think this is a really good opportunity for the CSU to become affirmative and on this for universal broadband, because we all know now that it's all interrelated. So anyway, I just thought if you have any thoughts on my questions, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Trustee Morales. So with respect to the broadband issue, is, as I said, the Governor's Council. So the Governor's Council has, in terms of the sectors, has Kristen Soares from the independent colleges and universities, Eloy Oakley from the community colleges, myself from the CSU, and Janet Napolitano from the University of California. And Monica Lozano pulls us together. Lande Agosi, the Senior Advisor for Higher Education for the Governor, is a member, as are others from the Governor's administration, as well as from Labor and the Chamber of Commerce. So the Governor's Council has been talking about this issue. And at our last meeting, which was maybe a month ago, perhaps 3 weeks, there were the idea of Tony Thurmond is on it, as well as his and was an all hands on deck approach to increasing the broadband accessibility around the state of California. Because Tony sees it for the K through 12 system, Eloy sees it for the community colleges, we see it for CSU, UC sees it for the University of California. So to the extent that the state has the resources, either directly or using some of the federal stimulus money, to increase the broadband accessibility across the frontier to urban landscape of California, we will all be better off. So it is at the highest level right now. It's one of the top 2 priorities that the Governor's Council is proposing to the governor to move forward. And obviously, private and not-for-profit partners in getting this done will be remarkable. So that's the piece there. And to be honest, I've forgotten your second question, or your first question.
Well, it was about what is the UC system doing, and also community colleges and the K through 12 system. If you have any ideas where they may be leaning.
Yeah, so the community colleges are across the map. Los Rios Community College just announced fully online now in the fall. We're not doing fully online. We're using virtual, sort of technology-enhanced education. So it will be different than that particular community college. The University of California's President Napolitano made the case a week or so ago, and their Regents meeting is coming up next week, where I'm sure there'll be more information about that. There will be some opening on the campuses in the fall, but it won't be business as usual. And then in the K through 12, I think it's also a work in progress, and hopefully Tony Thurmond, I don't know if he is on the line now, but we could get him to comment on what he sees in the K through 12, or Trustee Steinhauser might be able to comment at least what's happening in Long Beach. I know my Long Beach Unified School District student is still downstairs sleeping. But he's been doing homework in the afternoon and engaging with faculty as well. So I'm sure it's varied across the state. And everybody is a work in progress, sort of planning for the difficult stuff and hoping for the better stuff, and probably is going to end up, Trustee Morales, somewhere in the middle.
Thank you.
If the pandemic behaves. And if it doesn't behave and flares back up, as a lot of people think, or flares up dramatically in the fall with a combination of the disease plus influenza, that will make what we just went through feel minimal. And we have to keep that in our minds as we're doing our planning.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Trustee Morales. I don't see Superintendent Thurmond on, but Trustee Steinhauser, you want to take that opportunity and offer 30 seconds of your perspective of K through 12?
Sure, and thank you, Chancellor White. You always do such a great job, and the CSU faculty have done a remarkable job. Just like you said, we're going to have a hybrid of system that's going to be limited students on campus because we're looking at a 50% reduction per classroom. We're going to have online, so it's going to be a whole host of activities. And just like what you said, we're planning for the most restrictive as well as a hybrid of opportunities for our students. We will not have any summer programs. They'll all be online this summer. But as you said, it's going to be region by region. And it's a public health issue, and that's the number one charge.
Thank you, Trustee Steinhauser. We still do have a few other questions. So next up is Trustee Fagan.
Thank you, Chair Day. I don't want to let an assertion by Trustee Krinsk sort of go by. Chancellor White reacted, I think, properly. The concern I have is Trustee Krinsk's assumption that online or virtual education is demonstrably worse or less quality than in class. And I think that's a wrong assumption. And there's numerous studies and experiences, both across the country as well as at the CSU, that show online can be and is often equal to, or in some cases better, as far as outcomes for classroom teaching or for teaching. And I don't want to have students across the system think they're getting shortchanged because of these online classes. Obviously, the downside of virtual education for a temporary time is the loss of the entire collegiate experience and the social interaction and all the discussions in person after class and things. So there is a definite loss. The other thing is that it is clear from some of the studies that some students do better in online than other students. And that gets to the Chancellor's reference to the digital divide. And I'm glad to see that the administration is targeting that and doing its best to try and overcome those concerns. But it's very important to know that a message for the students, for their parents, their families, this is not a substandard education that they're going to be receiving. And certainly the faculty is doing an amazing job. I personally know a retired faculty member at Fullerton who taught online classes for years in economics. And she thought that the results often were as good, if not better, in that economics class than in a sage on the stage, as they talk about it. So the participation is better, and there's points of learning that are so many more times that the online computer experience can see how the student's doing rather than just a once or twice a semester. So the faculty is doing great. These classes are generally going to be terrific. I'm confident, And I hope that the community and the entire system, especially the students and their families, understand that this is not denigrating the educational experience. And with that, I'd like to ask Vice Chancellor Blanchard if he could just give us a very brief explanation from an expert and who's interacting with the academic senate and the faculty, why all that hopefully is true. And also the chancellor mentioned that there's a difference between virtual and online. And I would like to hear kind of what that is. So there's my 2 cents.
So I'll chime in at this point. Thank you so much, Mr. Fagan, that you couldn't be more accurate in terms of making sure that there is the common understanding that online and virtual are dramatically lower or different than face-to-face instruction. And that more importantly, as you indicated, yes, there is the human dynamic that is very different. But in terms of the quality of instruction, and most importantly, the ways in which we can assure that students are mastering the learning outcomes that are associated with the respective courses, that it shows very clearly that our students really are able to gain what they need in that course and feel very confident that that content is as rich as it would be face-to-face. A lot of that ties in with the fact that a number of our campuses are engaged in assessing the courses. Certainly we know that students on every semester that they do themselves weigh in on the quality of the courses. But on top of that, there is an evaluation that many of our campuses are engaged in now, looking at the quality of the online experience or virtual experience. So that's another layer of information that we're looking forward to having at our fingertips to show evidence of just what you've described. It's been amazing to hear some of the stories as well about the degree to which those faculty who had not had a lot of experience in virtual and or online education, how those faculty members who did have that experience quickly partnered with a lot of those faculty members and really got them where they needed to be as quickly as possible in order to be able to offer high quality education through that online and virtual venue. So the distinction, yes, you're absolutely right. There's going to be some variance here or there, but bottom line is that all of our faculty members have worked very hard this semester to make sure that the quality of the educational experience would not be compromised. It would be different, but that it wouldn't necessarily be compromised. And so the distinction between online and virtual, largely the fact that online really speaks more to some of the more traditional ways that we have seen education, synchronous and asynchronous, be offered through our faculty. And the difference there is that for some faculty members, that they felt more comfortable offering courses either through Zoom, like what we're doing right now, and it would still maintain some form of like a lecture style, but that it would be offered through Zoom. Or some are just doing PowerPoint presentations through Zoom. And so it's not at the more sophisticated levels of online delivery that we may see for those faculty members who have been teaching online, like the one that you described earlier that taught economics, that person may have. But it's still virtual education and making sure that they're staying as connected with faculty members as possible. So that's where the distinction lies between online education versus virtual education. It's still connecting directly with students in some form, but it's not a one size fits all.
Lauren, could you spend a few seconds more on the lessons we've learned in graduation initiative about in addition to a fantastic faculty member in the instructional space, but the essential elements of student support and academic support. It's that coming together of student support, academic support, and faculty expertise that creates the learning environment that our students benefit from. And that's an element in the virtual space as well.
Yes, it is. And thank you for reminding me of that, Chancellor. The reality is that, yes, there's the classroom instruction side, and there's the dynamic and the power of the relationship that between the faculty member and the student to ensure that that level of pedagogy is occurring on an effective manner. But as you well know, that we also have the benefit of other layers of support to make absolutely sure that that learning experience is as rich for for our students as possible. And so a number of our campuses, and I'll point out Fullerton as being one of those campuses, that have worked very hard to ensure that the kind of support services that we have in place, both academic and student support, that those continue to help students to be able to persist and, most importantly, to perform well in those respective courses. And so what I know firsthand Fullerton has done is essentially put online all of its academic and support services. So if a student needs a tutorial in math or in English or in sciences, that they have the benefit of being able to take advantage of that through a virtual modality online. Or if the student really has gained a lot from a respective cultural center and that dynamic of the cultural center or the dream center, that they are able to continue that relationship with the support staff in those respective offices, but through a virtual modality. And so there really is a substantial amount of work that has already occurred and is ongoing to make absolutely sure that for the fall semester, unlike the spring semester where we had to transition quickly, this really gives the opportunity in terms of this conversation we're having now about the decision to go primarily virtual. It gives the opportunity now for us to really work with our faculty and staff in further strengthening the opportunities that we will have available for students, both in terms of what's happening in the classroom, the virtual classroom, but also in terms of the support offices that are very essential to ensuring that our students are able to continue to persist and to graduate.
Thank you, Dr. Blanchard. We still do have a few more questions before we wrap this up. Trustee Furstenberg, and then I'll come back to Trustee Kames, who has another question.
I thought 105 days ago, Tim, that I couldn't be prouder of the CSU. But I now realize how utterly remarkable this institution really is, the way, especially, as you said, the way the faculty, the staff, and the students have responded. I can personally speak to what it means to be in a virtual online class, because I participated in one at CSUN, where the faculty member Anna Marie Piersimoni, who was a former colleague of mine at AFI, in the new media area. So she's very comfortable with this. But that course was truly extraordinary for the students. And I know that the faculty who are experienced in this area have been incredibly supportive as well of other faculty members who are less comfortable, but who are eager to find ways to communicate with their students. So I just wanted to say, I've been there, I've done that. These courses can work in a most exciting way. Sorry to take the time.
No, that's a great comment. Thank you, Trustee Furstenberg. I'm sure Tim and Lauren and President Harrison are glad to hear that too. Trustee Kames.
Thank you, Chair Day. I'll just be pretty quick. I have two questions, if that's okay. The first being, has there been any discussion about student fees for fall? And then the second is, historically, outside of the classroom activities have contributed to student success. And so for those on campus or living near campus, has there been any discussions about limited or safe student activities happening?
Well, with respect to the, I was going to use the word extracurricular activities, but in terms of activities on campus by those who live in the area, those too will need to meet the rigorous safety and health and welfare standards that will be in place at the time. So today, the mantra is distancing, physical distancing and masks. By the time the fall comes around, it may be some other mitigation activity. And so it's not just in the classroom or laboratory or studio where we have to do that, but it's in the common gathering spaces on a campus and the overall capacity of a campus for human density. So a smaller footprint campus, such as the Maritime Academy, is a different density, a different number of people can be in that space compared to a larger campus that has a bigger footprint. And so all of that stuff is being factored in to how the management and leadership of a campus has to go forward. With respect to tuition and fees, we will we have not had that conversation yet because we are waiting to get through the May revise and have a better sense of sort of the costs that we're facing. And so that'll be a conversation for us in the July Board of Trustees meeting.
Thank you, Chancellor. Thank you, Trustee Kames, for the question. So I believe I've gotten through all of the trustees who have questions or comments. If I haven't, please click on that icon now. If not, we're a little bit past, but we're going to make up some good time here. So with that, we will conclude the business of the committee on the whole. We have structured the next 4 committees with all items on consent for each committee. So we should be able to make up some time. Trustee Simon, will you please convene the Committee on Collective Bargaining?
Absolutely, and thank you, Chair Day.